Hi, welcome to Quid Pros Quo. I'm Rin.
And I'm Zach.
And today we're talking about microfiction. I am super excited to talk about microfiction today because I had a phase in high school where I only wrote microfiction. And none of it was very good.
That's how it goes.
I'm a better writer now, and that's what counts.
Yes.
It helped me on my journey to become a better writer.
Yes. You start out with something, you're not very good at it, and then you do it more and you get better at it. That's how it goes.
Yes, absolutely. So, Zach, do you want to tell us what microfiction is?
Sure. Microfiction, put simply, is just a really, really short story. It's shorter even than a short story. What does that even mean? Well, it depends on who you talk to. It depends on the submission requirements for whatever you're looking at. Some people say that microfiction is less than 100 words. There's a subset of microfiction that's called Twitter fiction, which is fiction that's written in 140 characters or less, or whatever Twitter's character limit is these days. But the point of it is that it's just a super short story.
Nice. We're going to start by reading some microfiction. Where we sourced our microfiction for this episode is the online magazine Centrofictionist. And Zach, do you want to tell us a little bit more about Centrofictionist?
Yeah, so Centrofictionist is an online short story or an online microfiction literary magazine. And you can find it at thecentrofictionist.home.blog. You just type that in, it'll take you to their website, and you can find all of these different examples of microfiction. So you can see what's publishable, what kind of the standards are, what kind of the format is of the genre. Because it's really hard to write something if you've never read an example of it.
Exactly. You got to do your research, and research in fiction is reading fiction.
Yes.
So we looked at some of the top stories on Centrofictionist, and we came away with two that we're going to read for you today. Why I Don't Eat Birthday Cake and Generations. And we'll tell you where they line with word count. We'll analyze them a little bit. We'll talk about what makes some good examples of microfiction. So I'll read Why I Don't Eat Birthday Cake by Uma Hamzik. My mother spent summers peeling peaches from our orchard and boiling them in sugar syrup. The jars of compat were for rare guests, Ramadan dawns, birthdays. She would hide one jar for December and let me eat with my fingers. Peaches slurped down my throat and frozen honey, sour flesh shocking my baby teeth as I slipped Agda syrup off my wrists. I ate everything and complained of a stomachache, napping on the tattered couch, her cool palm on my forehead. Now I buy canned peaches at supermarkets and eat over the sink. It's cheaper than plane tickets. So this was just such an impactful story to me when I read it because it, evokes all these childhood memories of eating home canned fruit, which my mom always did. And it was just so connected to childhood and the peaches slipping down your throat and frozen honey, sour flesh shocking my baby teeth. It was just such beautiful imagery to me.
Yeah, and then at the end you get that twist inside of the emotion of the story where it goes from being a high spot into a low spot. And I think that's really what drives microfiction is that shift from one state into another. And Absolutely. It can be positive emotion with negative emotion. It could be, oftentimes microfiction will go for surprise or humor as an example, or as the twist that they're going for. But the twist really lies at the heart of the microfiction. And in this case, you have the twist of sort of this childhood, these childhood memories coupled with an adult reality. I mean, lots of us who are, transitioning from, adolescence into young adulthood have found ourselves doing things like this, where we're thinking, it'd be so much better to have, one of our parents' home-cooked meals or whatever, but we're having Wendy's for the fourth time this week, and it's looking like we're going to have Wendy's tomorrow too. And, it's cheaper to, get your 4 for $4 at Wendy's than to drive home, especially with gas prices being what they are right now.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Or even fly home.
Yep.
Everything. Traveling is expensive. Existing is expensive.
Yes.
But yeah, absolutely. More on the twist, I thought this twist was very impactful because it also totally changes the imagery of the story. Mm-hmm. It goes from this really rich imagery to just kind of this more bland imagery, which reflects the way canned peaches versus home canned peaches are.
Yep.
Because if you've ever had home canned peaches, they are so much better and more flavorful than like store-bought canned peaches, and it just like kind of shows that the ending is like a pale memory in comparison to the beginning.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that's nice about microfiction is that it rewards going in and looking at it a bit closer.
Mm-hmm.
When you go back and you look at it, you start to recognize things that you maybe didn't realize on the first pass. I sort of think about microfiction in the same way that I think about art. I've been spending a bit of time inside of art museums recently, and it's really easy to go from painting to painting and just kind of be like, oh, it's a painting. Oh, it's a painting. Oh, you know.
Oh, and that one's the sculpture.
Yeah, exactly. But if you will stop and you'll look at a painting or a sculpture and you'll really take it in and you'll really observe it and you pick it apart, then you're going to have a much different relationship with it and it will become much more meaningful to you than if you hadn't. I know that I've had that experience where, I've seen a painting and been like, oh, this is a nice painting. It's pleasant to look at and that sort of thing. But as I really look at it and observe it, I feel it challenging me and inviting me and, changing me. And, there's one painting in particular that I'm thinking of where it's one of those things that I come back to as like a symbol that I can use to understand, heavy and complicated things inside of my life.
Yes, exactly. It's like how good art not only like answers your questions, but also gives you more questions to answer.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to read our second microfiction piece?
Let's do it. This is Generations by Faye Rappaport-Desprez. The year had been difficult. Looking back, it was hard to find anything good. He'd lost his job, and now they could lose the house. His father's face haunted him, that gravelly voice. What a joke. You're a failure. The dog could do better than you. Usually he'd been drunk, his eyes bloodshot, face red. Little Billy wandered into the doorway. "Dada!" he called, teetering halfway across the room before falling. The boy started to cry. He rushed over to Billy, picked him up, and kissed his head. "Don't cry," he said, cuddling his son. "Look how far you ran."
Yeah. So the twist in this one is like goes along with like generational trauma, like his father like being abusive and then like not perpetuating that trauma onto his son.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought this one was really nice because by the end of like look how far you ran, you forget that the beginning was like looking back, it was hard to find anything good. So like even in the midst of dark times, there's like still good things, and it was very wholesome.
Yes. It's sort of the opposite direction of what was going on with the last microfiction piece that we looked at, where you're going from high emotion to low emotion. On this one, you're going from low emotion to high emotion. And like we talked about, that's kind of the engine that powers your microfiction, is that shift from one emotional state to another. And that can be backed up by decisions that you make about the prose. For example, in this story, at the beginning, it's very general, and it's things that nebulously happened in the past. But at the end, they're very specific, very concrete experiences where it's not something that happened in the past or is happening right now, but it is a specific moment that is fixed in time and it's right there.
Yes, absolutely. And it just again goes to show that the twist is like the center of microfiction, and because imagine if like the story ended like right before little Billy wandered into the doorway.
That's a bummer.
Like, that's a bummer. The dog could do better than you, and like that would just be like so sad, and it wouldn't be as nearly as uplifting of a piece. It wouldn't be as good of a piece, in my opinion, if it didn't have that twist, because it wouldn't be fulfilling its purpose as microfiction.
So if we're writing our own microfiction pieces, the twist is often a good spot to start, where you're figuring out what is the twist that I want to have happen here. Am I going from low to high? Am I going from high to low? What are my bookends going to be, and how am I going to transition between them?
Yep, absolutely. I think the last thing we want to talk about for microfiction is that it's a good way to practice in public. which is to say it's a good way to get lots of work out quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you have a really good story about...
Yes, I love this anecdote. So there's the story that I've heard, not sure if it actually happened. I sure hope that it did, though, where you have this pottery teacher who divides the class into two groups. One of these groups is going to be graded on the quantity of ceramics that they produce. So they're just supposed to make a lot of them. The other group is going to be graded on the quality of the ceramics that they produce. And so you can kind of see that one of them is being graded on quantity and one of them is being graded on quality. And at least inside of our Western culture, we kind of lean more towards the quality over quantity, at least if you don't work inside of a factory or Walmart or anything. And what happens is that at the end of the semester, the teacher is looking at the kinds of artwork that was produced by the students, and they found that those students that were just worried about making as much of it as possible had higher quality work than the students who were just agonizing over this one piece trying to make it perfect. Because the ones that were looking at quantity were willing to experiment and to try something new, and if it didn't work, okay, who cares? It's just going to be weighed in the end. And with microfiction, you can do the same thing, where you can crank out 20 microfiction pieces, and maybe 18 of them are really, really bad, but you have 2 that are really, really good and are a lot better than what you would have gotten if you had stopped after the first 2 and then tried to agonize them and kind of like push them into
some final form that was better than what it started as.
Yes.
Yeah. I would say that it goes on with the idea of practice makes progress. Because, art's never perfect. Like, even if it's technically perfect, no one's going to agree that it's perfect.
Yes.
But it does make progress, and eventually, the more you practice, the better you'll be.
Yeah, and you mentioned practicing in public, where it's something that is really easy to share because, people are more likely to read something that's less than 100 words or, less than 140 characters, depending on what range you're going for, than they are going to be willing to read your 400,000 word novel that you've been working on for 3 years.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to get that in front of a lot of people and for them to give you feedback about, like, oh, I really like your writing, or your writing is boring, which we hope nobody ever says that to you. But you can get that constructive criticism a lot quicker and a lot more easily than you can with a project that requires more commitment, like a short story or a novel.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been Quid Pros Quo. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time.